Stop. I need your undivided attention. I am Jamie Coleman Williams. I am proud to have been born into the African Methodist Episcopal Church, a church born out of protest. Our church has always led the way in striving to make our country live up to its stated ideals. Right now, an attempt is being made to suppress the vote. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that we AMEs again band together, this time to assure every eligible voter goes to the polls and votes on or before November 3rd. I'm urging you to partner with AME Alert to make sure all eligible voters cast their votes. Our votes count.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest edition of the TCR Dialogues. I am your host this afternoon, Chuck Hobbs, coming from Tallahassee, Florida. We have a great show heading for you. First up, we have Bishop Gregory Ingram, who I will introduce in a few minutes further. And we also anticipate at some point in time this afternoon, United States Representative Gregory Meeks will be joining us as well. But first, I'd like to introduce Bishop Ingram, a stalwart in our faith. Member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, Wilberforce graduate. I have to put the plug in for the Noops. And I want to welcome you to the show. Good afternoon, Bishop Ingram.
Good afternoon, Brother Chuck. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Listen to me. We were having a wonderful conversation before we came on air about the state of the 2020 election. And I know that you were indicating that you have some very interesting meetings coming up with, I believe, Vice President Biden, hopefully soon to be President Biden, and the Harris campaign. What are your thoughts about where things stand right now with us barely 20 days away from the final day, election day itself?
Well, we're poised in position and really looking forward to really a major change and a shift in this country and the nation. When President to get the people out. I'm involved with 300 to 400 ministers. We put together 300 or 400 ministers, state of Pennsylvania, to drum up support. We are dealing with people from various diverse backgrounds and an ecumenical movement. I see a lot of positive signs taking place, and we got people excited about the campaign, particularly with Vice President Biden and Senator Harris a winning ticket. And so we're praying to come November the 3rd that evening, November the 4th, we're going to jump up and shout in victorious celebration, knowing that what we've been praying for is coming to pass.
No doubt about it. Have you been inspired by what you are seeing so far with the number of voters turning out early already? I saw the other day where lines were wrapped around the building in Georgia. I'm anticipating high turnout in South Carolina, as well as Florida and other states of the Old South. The potential there to turn a Senate seat blue. I see that Lindsey Graham is being considered as one who could lose his position. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, Brother House, I'll tell you, I'm excited again. I'll use that word quite a bit today. But to have people standing in line 12, 14, 16 hours to vote, which suggests that they very much are at a point where they really want to see this country turn around. We cannot continue to have this representation in Washington. It's very interesting, if I could just digress for a second. It was a man who was talking about draining the swamp. He is a swamp. And not only the swamp, he's a cesspool. I mean, when you start dealing with all this stuff, he has a Donald Trump mindset and a Donald Duck mentality. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we have to come to a point where we're seeing people from all walks of life, different nationalities, coming together in the spirit of core of saying we're in this together. And much like the Black Lives Matter movement, the We Too movement, all the various movements, it's more than just an organization now. it's a major movement taking place from the bottom up and the top down. So I'm excited about what's taking place.
Yeah, I am too. And one of the things, I was telling you earlier that I'm a graduate of Morehouse College, and one of my schoolmates, he was 3 years ahead of me, but Raphael Warnock, this minister in Atlanta, at Ebenezer, yes, he has a great chance of potentially defeating Republican incumbent Kelly Loeffler in a few weeks. And again, we're really hoping that Jamie Harrison can take out Lindsey Graham up in South Carolina. I never thought that I would see either Georgia or South Carolina send another Democrat to the Senate in my life. And again,
you know what that's representative of too, don't you?
Yes, sir.
It's tantamount to the whole Reconstruction period, when we had more Black representatives in the Congress and state Senate and all that. I just see God's hand moving about. And so that hands that once were picking cotton, now picking the elected officials and seeing what God is doing. So we all should be excited and become witnesses and ambassadors for this great cause for such a time as this.
No doubt about it. And I want to make sure that all of our viewers, if you could check in and let us know where you are from and what your home church is and what district you hail from, we would appreciate that. I usually start the conversation off with that. Again, I'm Chuck Hobbs. I am a member of Bethel AME here in Tallahassee, Florida. And my pastor is Reverend Julius McAllister. And my bishop is none other than A.J. Richardson. And so I want to backtrack with you right quick. We got Representative Meeks who's coming in.
There he is.
All right. Well, so we greet him. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
God bless you.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Yeah, we're doing well. We hear that you're real busy, and so we're grateful that you have a few moments with us this afternoon, and we're going to just continue to talk. Now, I can tell you where we have been. Brother Ingram and I, Bishop Ingram and I have been talking about the state of politics with barely 20 days left until Election Day on November 3rd. And so we're really excited about the turnout that we have seen so far in Georgia. We're hearing that there are going to be record numbers in South Carolina. We're optimistic that we might send 2 Democratic senators to Washington here in the next few weeks with Raphael Warnock and Jamie Harrison. So that's pretty much where we are. We've got you up to speed right now. But with that, members of the jury, you can tell I've done too many trials in my career. To our audience, we have none other than the Honorable Gregory Meeks, United States Congressman from New York, who is with us here this afternoon. With that, Congressman Meeks, can you tell our crowd a little bit about yourself, where you hail from a ecumenical standpoint, your home church, and what the AME faith has meant to you throughout your life?
Well, let me just tell you, first of all, God is first in my life.
Right.
I tell everyone that, my mother taught me, she says, no matter what you do in life, no matter who you are, what title you have, no matter how successful you are, whatever that means, you were born a child of God and you will die a child of God. And to keep solid in faith. So I hail from Queens, New York, where I'm a member of the Allen AME Church, where my pastor is the Reverend Dr. Floyd H. Flake and Elaine Flake. And let me just tell you, that church and my pastors and my brothers and sisters, I'm just embedded in them. And I've learned so much. It has been the lifeblood of me spiritually, internally, as well as politically, because I've had an opportunity to see and learn from Reverend Dr. Floyd Flake on how you turn dreams into reality. And it is based upon that faith that, there's things that you do and you want to do. And it takes faith to keep you at it, because there's a lot of times, especially in this business, if you didn't have that faith, you would give up. So I learned through the church, especially at Allen, but the AME, wherever AME church I go to, because it's also founded in how we as a people have been able to survive in the United States of America, coming from slave ships to where we are right today, where we even had Barack Obama as the president of the United States of America. So it has meant so much to me, and it has grounded me in faith, and has told me to always look at the entire situation. I just close on this because of the time of which we live in. You know, and I said this recently at an event that we had in Queens, New York, where we are renaming an entire boulevard,
Right.
the Floyd H. Flake Boulevard. I said that, you know, a lot of people are depressed and they're down as to what's taking place in the United States now. And I remember a sermon that Pastor Flake gave talking about, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. And the message in that sermon, as he pointed out, was that we walked through it. We didn't lay down in it. We didn't die there. We didn't stay there. We walked through it. And we were better when we got through it. And so I use that for these last 3.5 years as we've gone through the valley of the shadow of death of what's been taking place here. And we've seen come to fruition what, you know, a lot of America, what we knew all along when you look at what took place with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and, you know, talking about criminal justice, we're going to get through it to a better place. And that's the grounding that I got in the AME church that keeps me going. And, you know, it's very important to me.
Bishop Ingram, if you had an opportunity to ask Representative Meeks a question in regards to using.
And Bishop was there.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I was there.
Bishop was there.
I got
Me
you.
and Bishop had a little thing going on, you know, because he
Y'all
asked me a
talk to me about
question.
it.
He
Okay.
asked me a question about who was Merrick. We was
Right.
changing that.
I got you. Now, when you say who was Merrick, you're talking about Merrick, who, Garland
No, who
or
was married?
Merrick Boulevard.
Boulevard?
So,
I got you. I'm
We were
sorry. I
changing.
totally
So
missed.
why was this place named Merrick?
I
And
got
because now we were moving, you know, we found out later when it was, you know, dealing with a Native American subject. But how appropriate is to take that Merrick off and put in to
Flake.
go from Merrick Boulevard to Floyd Flake Boulevard and all that he's done for our community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With that in mind, Bishop Ingram, I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but Representative Meeks, let me ask you something. I know that you share something in common with my editor at the Christian Recorder, John Thomas. You both have done a lot of work with the Afro and Latinx or Latino, depending on who's saying it, culture. What are your thoughts as we stand 20 days away from Election Day on the impact of Decision 2020 on both your Black and Latinx constituents moving forward into 2021?
Everything's on the line. When you listen to the policies and the words and the deeds of this current person that lives in public housing at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue,
Right.
you know that everything's on the line. Democracy's on the line. When you see what he's trying to do with this court, for example, if you talk about this court, I remind folks that after the Emancipation Proclamation, what was able to do when you talk about segregation, you talk about Plessy v. Ferguson, it was the courts that ruled that was the law of the land. And we suffered from direct oppression, segregation, Plessy v. Ferguson for almost 100 years before the courts changed. All of that is at stake now in this country. And so that's why it's significant that we look at the presidency, but not only that, what is highlighted, as you just talked about when I came on, the significance of having a majority in the U.S. Senate that does the approval of the justices. Whether you talk about Supreme Court all the way down with these lifetime appointments, of which will exist longer than any presidency of the United States of America. All of that is on the line this November. And that's why we've got to come out to vote like never before so that we don't get everything rolled back on us. You talk about, voting rights and voter suppression, et cetera, what they would like to do to prevent us from voting in a way that we have the right to, that was fought for during the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts of 65 and 64. All of that's on the line right now. And that's why we are at a unique time in our history, and we can show that we can get through this thing by our participation and not let history repeat itself.
Absolutely. I want to ask you brothers this. I have been watching when I've had an opportunity to this week, some of the confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett. As you know, Donald Trump nominated her last month at an event that has turned into a super spreader event, it seems, as most of the people, a good number of his inner circle that attended that event in the Rose Garden have come down with COVID-19 in the days and weeks since. But there is a sense that she could be confirmed by a Republican Senate, even though Democrats in Congress, as well as across the country, have talked about the frustrations that Merrick Garland was nominated by President Obama 4 years ago, and Mitch McConnell and those allowed that nomination to fall short. With that in mind, if Judge Barrett becomes Justice Barrett within the next few weeks, I have noticed that in the first presidential debate and the vice presidential debate last week between Senator Harris and Vice President Mike Pence, that both Vice President Biden and Senator Harris quite deftly avoided the question of should Democrats, if we keep the House, take the Senate, and Joe Biden wins in a few weeks, pack the courts with more judges. Representative Meeks, I'm going to throw that to you, and then Bishop Ingram. If there is a 6-3 split, if Coney Barrett is confirmed, should that be something, even though both Biden and Harris are both being very coy about the subject right now, is that something the Democrats should pursue to try to balance out what would be a very strong conservative majority?
So what you said is key. We don't want to stack the courts. We want to balance courts.
Right.
And that's the way it works. So they want to try to flip it. They're the ones that are stacking. And I think that what Senator Harris and Vice President Biden don't want that message to go around. So what they try to do is to dodge the issue and reverse it. Like, we're the ones that are packing the court. They're the ones that packing the court. So what I want to think that we need to consider is, how do we get a balanced court? I don't want to pack it. I want to balance it.
I like that.
They should consider how we will balance the court so that it's reflective of all of the people in the United States of America. The reason why they are trying to force this down our throats right now is they don't want the people's voices to be heard, and they don't want a balanced court. It is, I think, will be the responsibility and our job and obligation so that we can have a just system that the courts are balanced. So should we consider making sure that the courts are balanced? I think we should consider to make sure the courts are balanced. I don't want to stuff it. I want to balance it.
Understood. Bishop Ingram.
Well, I think the congressman has really been consistent across the board on that. And if you listen to him on various interviews he's had with CNN and MSNBC, I mean, he makes us proud, as well as all the congresspersons with the Congressional Black Caucus. Let me digress just for a second or two. When he mentioned about balance, when you take in consideration over 194 federal judges have been appointed by us, and not one is black.
That's right.
I mean, the whole issue now is reflective of only them and not us. And so I think what you have now is the nation saying to themselves, enough is enough. If I can use Fannie Lou Hamer's statement, enough is enough, I'm tired of hell, I ain't gonna take it no more. But the folks are saying they ain't gonna take it anymore. I wanna say, two things about our congressman. When you take in consideration the committees he sits on and provides leadership for, whether you're talking about the finance of one of the real progressive thinkers, he makes us proud. He made mention of the fact that Floyd Flake, who incidentally was one of my best friends and classmate in college, but he and his wife, I'm talking about the congressman and his wife, wonderful people. His wife is named Simone, right?
Yes, sir.
Simone Marie Meeks. Now, you have to take that name, Simone. It was Nina Simone who came up with the song, Strange Fruits with African Roots. Now, when you start dealing with that, this whole matter about trying to, fruit does not fall far from the tree. And we got a rotten apple in that White House right now. When Congressman Meeks talking about public housing, now he's a product of public housing. And I use the phrase that it was goatee, and then later on it was Oliver Wendell Holmes, who I thought was the original person who came up with the phrase, but it was goatee who said the greatest thing in the world, not so much where you come from, it's where you're going that really makes a difference. Now look at Congressman Meeks, a graduate of Adelphi and then a jurisprudence degree from Howard. I mean, God is just putting things in place, and we got folk now addressing the whole issue. Now, this matter that race is not so much, you listen to her, and she's a brilliant woman. I mean, she got some education and stuff behind her, but it's not so much what she's saying is what she's not answering to. They are prescribing, putting these questions to her that makes her look like, the spotlight is on her. But believe me, they're trying to, when he uses this phrase, make America great again, he's trying to make it white again. And the fact that it's an interesting mosaic and a tapestry, because they have to reflect all of us. And this quilt now says that we got to bring people from all walks of life to make this quilt reflective of who we are. And so I just think that, what's happening now is a reaction. And we're not reacting, we're responding. And it's not fair,
Absolutely. Congressman Meeks, before we went on air this afternoon, the bishop and I were having a pretty frank discussion about the fact that there are some blacks across the country who actually identify as Republican, and that there are some black men in particular who there are some concerns that they still may cast votes for Donald Trump. And one of the things that the bishop and I spoke about was, sometimes people are pushed towards voting for whatever their individual preference may be, because being a Republican in an individual state might be good for them for the purpose of business contacts or business contracts, things of that nature. But I want to go in another direction with this. The bishop and I didn't get to go here, but I want to pose this to you two brothers. One of the things that I have noticed quite a bit on my posts, either my blog post or my own podcast, is there has been an undercurrent of what I would call sexism or misogyny thrown out by brothers. I mean, I expect it from the right, but I'm actually noticing it from black men. Negativity towards Senator Kamala Harris based upon gender, ranging from things that I won't mention on an AME church video this afternoon to even policy questions that really are the undercurrent is actually, I don't like her because I'm not going to support a woman. What can we as brothers, as black men, do to push back or to train up young boys and younger men coming up to understand that we have to push the mindset that women are to be seen, not heard, and not be a part of the policy considerations, that archaic notion? How do we address that as men and as a church moving forward?
You want me a bishop to answer that?
I want both of you to answer. So you spoke first, Congressman, so go ahead.
So, look, the education and standing together with our black men is tremendously important, and to make sure that we get the messaging out to them, and starting at an early age. Here's where a lot of times what you look at, I know in my community, you have some black men that have not had a black man in their life. So it is our, responsibility to a degree, is to make sure that we are engaging black boys in every which way. When I grew up, we had, whether it was sports, whether it was church, whether it was some other kind of activity, there was someone from the community. I always had a male, well, I happened to have had my father, but other than that, I had other male figures that were in my life that would mentor me. We better look at mentoring our young men from an early age so that they have a better understanding and not just allow themselves to be subject to some. I mean, this is what took place in 2016 election. The Russians, this is not, this is something that our U.S. intelligence agencies have verified. The Russians came in with a lot of the garbage of that nature, knowing and having it targeted at African-American males, knowing what the results would be. We've got to counter that, understand it, counter it, get closer to them. And that's why I really acknowledge some of the things that the National Basketball Association and some of the young men who are professional athletes did when they finally they stood up
Right.
when they talk about the Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, etc. So that's the kind of movement and voices that we need to be heard within the African American male community. I think they will make a difference. Bishop.
Yeah, Congressman, Brother Chuck, I think two things I'm going to say. One is that the pivotal role of a man is to be a protector and a provider. Now, years ago when I was in school, there was a lady by the name of Queen Mother who came and she gave a lecture. And she was talking about, at that time, people were talking about unwed mothers or what have you, right? And she talking about you can't have unwed mothers without talking about unwed fathers. And the fact of the matter is that we got to have some men to step up and be just what the Congressman said. They got to be mentors and be fathers for those persons who don't have them. When I was pastoring the church, I had a ministry called the Master's Men. And in order to become a master man, there was 26 weeks of a course you had to deal with. And the first course was the 5 I's of survival: identity, integrity, individuality, involvement, and intelligence. The issue is now you got to know, who am I? That's a fundamental question, Howard Thurman. Who am I? What I want? What I propose to get what I want. The fact of the matter is that you got several things going on. Chancellor Williams wrote a book about the destruction of a black civilization. And anytime you get to the point where you have a culture that does not affirm and lift up and honor our black women, something is wrong with us. And now the fact of the matter is, when you start dealing with the rappers and everybody else, you know, now I understand people need to make a living. But when you depreciate who you are,
Yes, sir.
when you call yourself out of your name,
Yes, sir.
and all of us know, and because Congressman came out of that background, had it too. Not so much what they call you is what you answer to that's really important. But the fact of the matter is, you got some stuff going on now that we got to, anytime a culture, whether a culture will not assimilate, they will annihilate. And some of the things that's happening now is that our value system has gone out the window in a way. And we got to restore some of that and bring a sense of real, go back to the Congressman piece about balance, about normancy, about dealing with civility. I mean, we got to get to this point where we affirm each other and not put each other down.
Absolutely, which leads to the next question that I want to delve into with you, brothers, which is, this year social justice has been such an important issue across America. It's an important issue every year, but
Sure.
it seems as if with us being quarantined due to the coronavirus, it seems more pronounced this year. With that in mind, one of the slogans that has come forth this year has been the whole concept of defund the police. Now, I am of the opinion that that's not the best public relations phrase that could have been come up with. I've always taken that as people want to reform the police. It's definitely something that I've worked toward throughout my career, and something I would like to see to come to fruition. I would like to ask you, brothers, how can we reform law enforcement in this country in a way where brothers and sisters are no longer shot and killed when they are unarmed? It can be done. It's done all the time with our white brothers and sisters, but somehow the police don't seem to be able to apprehend black suspects without the shooting. Is there something that we can do on a federal level, Representative Meeks, that will have teeth that can help solve some of these dilemmas?
Well, we did pass, in fact, the George Floyd Criminal Justice Act that I think took a number of those things into consideration of how you reform the police and how you also hold them accountable. You know, so for example, people should be paid the price if, in fact, you put your knee, your elbow, or anything else to block someone's windpipe. That should not take place. You should be on a list that if you are and have committed some violations, you should be on the list so that you can't go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and that will then prevent you from continuing those bad acts. You should make sure that there is an individual should not be or have immunity from being sued in police departments for the bad acts of that police department, because then there's nothing that they would have to, as far as paying for those acts. So that's one way that you change behavior. The other way is, we've talked about it here because I've talked to some of our black police officers, is you got to change the incentive system that takes place. Because what happens here, in New York, we've had this huge all across the country thing about stop
Stop
and
and frisk.
frisk.
Yeah.
And what happens is police were getting rewarded based upon the number of people that they stopped and frisked, even though many of them, most of them, overwhelmingly, had nothing to do with it. But if the incentive would have been not how many people you stopped and frisked, but how much,
Yeah.
how many times you were able to
Good.
avoid an incident, that you get
Zoom call.
rewarded and promoted for making sure that you calm down an
You send
incident,
it to me and
as
I'll be off
opposed to
the side.
instigating the incident or pushing it forward by calling somebody a name. That you intervened when a police officer was doing something wrong. The other police officer stepped in and said, this can't happen. You got to stop this. You get promoted for it as opposed to being demoted for it, as what's been taking place now. Those that have stood up and were speaking out, generally that meant the end of their career as opposed to lifting up their career. We should reverse that so that those who are silent, that should end their career. Those that stand up to do the right thing, that should lift up their career. And that changes the whole mentality of how the police move. And then, I always encourage to make sure that we get more people of color to become police officers. And don't forget who you are. When I got out of law school, I chose to be an assistant district attorney. Why? I didn't see too many black folks in there, but that's where you have a chance to make sure that there's justice had. If you will stand up and say you're not going to allow a bad act to continue. I had police officers that would come in to me, and I knew that they were lying and trying to cover something up. Then I would call their boss and say, don't you ever bring this person in here. And I would then, put in something in their files to show that they are not worthy of being a police officer.
Right.
So we've got to get more people involved in the system in that regard and standing up, and we can begin to change this thing.
Amen.
For me, Brother Chuck, 2 or 3 things I'll say. Number one, and that you made an earlier reference to, and I think the Congressman said it as well, about people forgetting who they are and where they came from. I have a phrase about that, about people suffering from catatonia schizophrenia. It means that, the mindset becomes important. One of the dynamics that has to happen is how do you desensitize some of this stuff? Because there has to be some sensitivity training and stuff. You got to re-educate people all over again to let them know either you're going to be part of the problem or you're going to be part of the solution. And it's not like you're not pointing fingers and telling on anybody, but they know who the bad apples are. They have an unwritten code about protecting each other. But the fact of the matter is, while the community is suffering, and so we have to say now, look, we are all for law enforcement. I mean, we really are. But the fact of the matter is, it has to be reflective, and the law has to be a law that's for everybody. I mean, the same thing that we're going to get charged for, white people have to get charged for, and the crime, the time must not vary the way it is. That's one thing. The other thing is that I'll put it in the biblical context, that God has 2 outstretched arms. One is strong enough to embrace justice. The other one is sensitive enough to deal with his sensitivity and his grace. Now, the fact of the matter is, those of us who have been blessed by God, and we see where some things are going wrong, we have an obligation to talk to. I mean, when I came up, I came up in Detroit, right? And there was a particular law enforcement group called the Big Four. Y'all know what those were big 6'4" or 5 or 6 white policemen. If you got in trouble, they were going to do you in. Then came along some black policemen, like Bad News Bonds and some other folk, who kind of balanced it out, and we knew what they were about, but they also had a sensitivity to the community. I think that, we're not trying to become their buddies. We're not trying to become their friends. They're law officers, and we're peaceful people. But the fact of the matter is that reason why people are talking about defunding some of this stuff, you can't spend more money on the criminality without dealing with trying to deal with correction. I mean, about the criminal justice system. I mean, when you start dealing with the industrial complex, you're building more money and putting more money in penalization and prisons than you do in schools and educating people. So it's the value system now. And whatever people have an interest in, they will make an investment with. So if you
Amen.
want criminals and all that, that's what you're going to do. But if we want good, abiding citizens, we have to put some more money into helping people from the bottom up come up and do something. All right?
Amen, Bishop. And with that, Representative Meeks, I know that you're on a tight schedule, so I'm going to ask you to put back on your assistant district attorney hat and give us the closing argument and take us on out this afternoon. What would you like to say to our viewers with only 20 some odd days left for Election Day, sir?
That our very democracy is on the line. And if someone tells you something, as this person in office has, when he tells you that anybody that's black comes from a so-called, an asshole country, when he tells you that, as we've seen that, like in New York, if you're from New York, about the Central Park Five, if you look at his family's history where they've had to be sued from discriminating, if he tells you that when you see like what took place in Charlottesville, there's good people on both sides, when he tells people who happen to be white supremacists to stand back and stand down, when he says that he doesn't know who David Duke is, when he says that he can't even use the words of white supremacists and that he condemns them, then you know exactly who he is. And all of that is on the line this November 3rd. And so if you can vote early, vote early. You don't have to wait till November 3rd. If you're from a state that allows you to vote early, if you've seen individuals on the line for a long period of time, vote early. If you feel because of the pandemic, etc., you don't feel safe, vote by mail. But, make sure that you get out there and utilize the power that you have. There's no greater power to change the conditions of this country than the power to vote. It is why individuals gave their life for that power. And so, in the words of my colleague and late great friend, the Honorable John Lewis, let's go out and get in trouble. Good trouble.
Good trouble.
There's good trouble to get in. Let's do that and let's vote. Yes, sir.
Yes, Congressman, thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon, and we hope to have you back soon enough so we can continue to break down to our viewers the crucial issues of our day. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. And Bishop, we love you.
Love
we
you,
love
man.
those
Be
words
good.
of
God bless
inspiration that you always give. Words from God. Thank you.
All
and
right,
give my
see
best
you.
to the missus. Thank you, Bishop.
God bless you.
All right. And Bishop
care.
Ingram. Yeah, you too, brother. Okay. And Bishop Ingram, you too. We thank you for coming on this afternoon. Do you have any parting words for our viewers this afternoon?
Well, Brother Chuck, I want to commend you and thank you and John Thomas and really the Congressman. You all are doing a great work, and I want you to don't come down. This is a time, there's a book I was reading by Joan Chittister who talks about the time is now, a call for uncommon courage. Now, this is a time where all of us got to step up to the plate. It's a time to use the vernacular in the streets for us to put up or shut up. This is a time for us to march and to make sure that we are together, to make sure that those persons who, for whatever reason, may elect to say that their vote may not count. No, we have to educate our people and really let everyone know that if it's not now, then when? If it's not us, then who? The fact of the matter is that we have a tremendous stake in this, not only because we want to see the change taking place in this country, but we got a person of our own color going to be the vice president. And again, it's something that you addressed, a strong, wonderful black woman. And the fact of the matter is, she would not have been selected had not she been qualified. And she is qualified. And for those brothers or people who are saying otherwise, then they need to really check it out. The fact of the matter is, and incidentally, she comes with a diverse background, you know? So I think that all of us owe it to ourselves to be change agents, and we can be that, and we're stakeholders. And I think at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, come November the 3rd and 4th, we can raise our hands and shout hallelujah and thank God that for such a time as this is history making time. Much like it was when President Obama got elected, this is history making time again. And so I want to say to all of us, let's do what we need to do. And because our people are dependent on it and they deserve it. And Generation Gen Unborn will rise up and call us a blessing, okay?
Amen, Bishop Ingram. Thank you so much. It's great to meet you, Noop, and God bless you and your family. You. Yes, sir, in the days ahead. And we'd like to thank you, our watchers this afternoon. And I have a few announcements. Our next TCR dialogue will be on October the 21st with Congressman James Clyburn and Antoine Seawright. We will also host Congressman Clyburn's message for the Tennessee Conference late night service. Support for the Christian Recorder you can support the Christian Recorder by buying a subscription for $36 a year. Visit www.thechristianrecorder.com. Again, that's www.thechristianrecorder.com. Support the AME Church Publishing House for your church, school, and worship needs. Featured product is the Empowerment Syllabus. Visit www.amecpublishing.com. And again, that's www.amecpublishing.com. Our sponsors for the day are Reverend Marvin C. Zanders for Bishop 2021. And we also are sponsored by Reverend Sylvester Beeman for Bishop 2021. And we would like to thank them. And now for our closing public service announcement from my bishop, A.J. Richardson.
I'm A.J. Richardson, Senior Bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. It seems that in every election cycle, someone is sure to say how important the upcoming election is. The narrative goes something like this: this is the most critical election in a generation. Well, this time we really mean it. We can't stress strongly enough just how crucial this election is. Up and down the ballot, national, state, and local elections. Voting is not only our civic duty, it is also our duty of faith with concerns for the environment, affordable health care, education, the economy, for our nation's place in the world, and the myriad other existential public policy issues that affect our lives, the lives of our families, and the next generation. By all means, vote.
Thank you. Good afternoon and God bless.